Hi, welcome back to Purpose Driven Church for Unificationists. We are finishing the chapter today on designing a seeker-sensitive service. We're going to cover the last few hints and practical tips that Rick Warren has that have worked for him in terms of creating a service that's inspiring for new people, but I believe also is inspiring for the people that you already have. One of the next tips that he talks about is printing a simple order of service, kind of like a bulletin, I guess. But basically, what he's saying is that unchurched visitors don't know what to expect when they come to your church. So this makes them anxious. A printed order of service says there are no surprises here. Telling the unchurched what you are going to do in advance relaxes them and lowers their defenses. But he does say that if you're going to have one, if you're going to have one, you probably don't want to have it saying, okay, we're going to have the invocation, the offering anthem, the invitational hymn, the benediction, the postlude. These are very, traditional religious terms that a lot of people don't know. And so it's really, when they see that, they know it's not really meant for them. But if they can't understand what you're saying, what your order of service is, or what you have in your program, then there's no reason to print it, he's saying. He says a Saddleback, instead of invocation and benediction, they simply say opening prayer and closing prayer. Instead of call to worship, they say song. And instead of offering, it says giving back to God. And if you need to, put in explanatory notes. It says if you go to opera or a play that is difficult to understand, they usually provide you with notes, some kind of extra information to help you understand what's going on. So it's really not that different for us. If we're really thinking from the point of view, we're really preparing this for people who are not religious or who are, who have been, away from church for a long time. He says to minimize church announcements. This is a complaint I hear from Unificationists, second gen many times, is that the announcements are very, very, very long and not structured. And he says if you don't create a policy of what warrants a public announcement, especially as your church gets larger, and what doesn't, you will end up using a significant portion of your service on internal church announcements. So he says that you can deal with this in certain practical ways. You can train your members to read the bulletin by saying something along the lines of, this week we've got a number of announcements for this group of people, young adults or whatever. Please be sure to read your bulletin to find out what's in there, what it is. Announce only events to apply to everyone. This is basically simple psychology, saying that if you announce events that are only for a certain subset of people, then those other people who aren't a part of that, they're going to not listen. They're going to stop listening. And eventually everyone's going to stop even paying attention to your announcements, which is frankly the way it is now for a lot of our announcements. I've found that from the point when we first came here that a lot of people just aren't even paying attention. And I think it's conditioning. He says avoid appeals for help from the pulpit. Pulpit appeals for volunteer help should be minimized in your seeker service. Personal recruitment works better anyway, which is very true. And do not conduct internal church business during a seeker service. Save it for your believer service. He says he even knows of one example where the church would actually ask the visitors to leave so that they could conduct their own service, important business with their members, which is kind of silly. He says continually evaluate and improve. He says that with NFL players, after the game, they watch their recording of how they did so that they can look for ways to improve for next week. But oftentimes in churches, we don't do that. We think that we're just doing well, even if we don't have results. We just keep doing the same thing. And if we just keep doing it long enough, then something will change. So he says that we should be more concerned than the NFL is about what happens in our service or in our programs for that matter. How effective are they? What can we do better? Get honest feedback from people, anonymous feedback if necessary. He says growing churches should always be asking, how can we do it better? They are ruthless in evaluating their services and ministries. Evaluation is the key to excellence. You must continually examine each part of your service and assess its effectiveness. And I think this also takes humility. Because without humility, it's really hard to think that your program or your service may actually not be meeting the needs or may not be having the impact that you think it should be having. But he goes on to finish up and wrap up the chapter, and he just says, remember whom you are serving. You may feel overwhelmed by all the suggestions I've given you for creating a seeker-sensitive service. Remember, these are important ideas, but they aren't all essential to building a seeker-sensitive service. As I stated earlier, the only non-negotiable elements of a seeker service are to treat unbelievers with love and respect, relate the service to their needs, and to share the message in a practical, understandable manner. And I think that also he mentions in the past beginning of the book that you can take all these practical advices, but if you can't cultivate a heart or a culture in your church that really cares about these people, then it's not going to matter. It's all gonna come through eventually at some point. So I would go further to think that my personal feeling is that all these tips and advice that we've been covering in the last 4 or 5 videos, they all come naturally through a sincere care for visitors and guests and your own members. If you're thinking, what is going to be the best experience for them, then probably a lot of these things will just happen naturally. And without that, you can do all these things superficially, but the heart won't be there and people won't respond. That's at least my feeling about it, my opinion. And he just remembers, you might get discouraged sometimes. He says you might get discouraged sometimes. He's gotten discouraged many times. But you just have to remind yourself, why are we doing what we're doing? Who are we doing it for? And he says how important it is to remind himself that he's doing this for God, because God gave him so much. And I think that on an additional note, you do it for people because you love God, because you care about God, and you want to return gratitude to God. One of the ways in which we do that is we care about what God cares about, which are His children, the ones besides myself or yourself. So that's all for today. And we'll look at the next chapter about music tomorrow. Thank you.